Everybody, I'm here with Scott Stokely from the Baysinger Disc Golf channel.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. They're finishing up over there, right? You guys are all good there. So what I'm going to do is, normally at the clinics we talk about backhand, sidearm, and putting, but for time reasons, because I won't have time to play doubles, I'll talk about backhand and sidearm, play doubles, and because putting we can do if it's darker. If anybody's interested afterwards, I'll be happy to do that. Have you guys been to a clinic before? Anybody? That's so awesome. Like, I love low expectations. Well, I've done 240 of these, 150 before I took 14 years off, about 80 or 90 since I've been back. So what I'm going to talk about at the clinic is sorry, I gotta get into like clinic mode. I'm going to try to strip disc technique down to the most basics. I've done a lot of research. I've read other books on other sports and watched videos, and best analogies, I actually came across a book on the technique of throwing darts, and the book was 300 pages long about how to throw darts. And to me that was nonsense, right? Like, you hold it like this, you lock your elbow in place, you do that, and then you keep doing it till you're good. Like, that's page one of how to throw darts. The other 299 pages I think are nonsense. So what I try to do at the clinic is I'm going to try to strip away the other 299 pages and take throwing technique down to the most basics, because I think it's not easy, but it's actually very simple. There's only a couple steps. So starting with the backhand, I always start with the grip. Unlike a lot of things I'm going to talk about, I don't believe there's ever going to be a universally correct grip in disc golf. That's because everybody's got different shaped hands, different length fingers. We prefer discs with different rim configurations. I don't believe there's ever going to be one right way to grip. But there are three general categories of grips, and I think all of them are okay. The first is the fan grip, which is all four fingers underneath, or all four fingers spread out, fingernails up. There's a pinch grip, which is all four fingers underneath, fingers pulled in with the fingernails up, and then the power grip, which is all four fingers turned underneath, fingernails down. Again, all three of these grips are right, but there's two things they all have in common. The first is you want to grip with all four fingers. So unlike, say, a three-finger grip with the pinky off the rim, or what's just as common is a grip with the index finger on the rim, this is actually a three-finger grip. This finger's not doing anything here. You want four fingers gripping the disc. Second thing is, on top of the disc, you want your thumb resting up against right where you can feel the underside lip of the disc. So if you take your thumb, squeeze it down and slide it forward until you can feel a lip. That's where you want it to be. The way I like to think of it is, hey, what's up, man? The way I like to think of it is if someone were to like pour baby oil on top of your disc and you had no friction at all, but you had to grip the disc to throw it, you would slide your thumb up and you would take advantage of this lip as the only thing to actually grip against if you had no friction. That's where you want your thumb to be. After the grip, everything I'm going to talk about is going to come down to keeping everything linear. I'm going to totally hammer this point home. It's the most important part of throwing, is keeping everything in a line. And by linear, I mean everything is going to be either in the direction you're throwing or 180 degrees opposite direction you're throwing. But everything is going to be on that line. And I'm going to give a lot of other sports analogies. Best analogy is darts, the ultimate game that's just aiming. Anything other than back straight away from where you're throwing into the target would obviously be wrong. A backswing like this, a rotation like this, and any little thing that isn't this is incorrect. Well, the same thing is going to apply to disc. So with that in mind, I will point out, when I say everything's linear, it's not in a line towards the target. It's not in line necessarily with where the T-pad's pointing. It's in line the direction you're throwing. So for example, if I was throwing to that target here, and the T-pad of course is pointing to the target, but I had to go to the right of this first tree here, everything's going to be in a line to the right of the tree. So I can forget about where the disc is going to wind up. It's the direction the disc leaves your hand. That's the line everything's going to take place on. The run-up, hey, thanks by the way for appreciate everything. So the run-up, after the grip is the run-up. The run-up is always going to come down to the final three steps. These days, most of you guys are familiar with the X step, right? That's that. When I did the clinics back in the 90s, that was kind of this new idea, but everybody's pretty familiar now. But those steps are step, slide behind, and step. I think most of us already do that. What's important is those 3 steps are going to need to take place along that line, the direction you're throwing. So if, I'll demonstrate everything along the tee-pad. If you're throwing this direction, the 3 steps are in a straight line down the tee-pad, in a straight line, and in a straight line again. Now the run-up is always going to come down to your final 3 steps. Everything up to those last 3 is a way of building momentum, but the throw is executed in 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. So if, for example, you have a 5-step run-up, which is what I prefer, a couple steps to get momentum, don't think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Think of it as 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. A 7-step run-up is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, because the throw is executed on those final 3 steps. Along with those 3 steps, the disc is also going to have 3 separate motions that's going to correspond with those 3 steps. And this is something I call the slingshot technique. I think of a slingshot where you put the handle out in front of you, you pull back in a straight line 180 degrees opposite from where you're aiming, you let go, and you shoot back in a straight line where you're aiming. Well, the disc is going to basically do the same thing that the projectile does in a slingshot. So the first step, is going to be 3 steps. The first step is to handle the slingshot. Set the disc out at the point of release, and it's also important at this point to set the angle of release. If you're throwing a shot with hyzer, for instance, don't start flat and then try to somehow figure out when to put the angle on it. Start the disc at the angle you're going to be throwing, and once you set it there, you can just forget about it, but the angle's set. The second step is during the X step is the drawing back on the slingshot, and this is stepping behind and pulling back the disc in a straight line 180 degrees opposite direction from where you're throwing. So when you step behind, this goes back in a straight line. Again, it's important to pull it back in a straight line because this is the only way to aim, because when you pull the disc back, you take your eyes off the target, and once you take your eyes off the target, you're never going to find that target in your eyes again. So on the backswing, your eyes come off the target. The only way you can aim is by keeping everything linear. So you're running up along this line. You start with the disc on this line. You step along this line, take your eyes off the target, you pull back along that line. As long as you're still staying on the line, this is going to allow you to get the aim just to when you execute the throw forward. So second step, pull back in a straight line, 180 degrees opposite from the target. At the furthest point back in your backswing, you should be able to look down the hand, up the arm, and past the shoulder and see exactly where the disc is going to be going. So if I was aiming that direction, I should be pointing right here exactly where I'm going to want the disc to go. Then on the third step is the releasing of the slingshot. It's stepping and then reversing, pulling the disc back in a straight line back up to the release point, which is back to where you started. Now this is the first of, I'm going to talk about 3 big misconceptions of throwing techniques, and this is the first one. Have you guys heard or read that you want to pull your disc across your chest when you throw? Okay. I would say it's wrong. It's partially wrong. The reason why it's partially wrong is the idea of pulling across your chest is really a beginner technique. The idea is learn to do one thing consistently, this, and then buy a disc that goes left, a disc that goes right, one that goes far, one that goes short. It's kind of analogous to ball golf. Learn one correct swing and then club up or club down depending on how far you are. It's kind of the same idea. The reason why it's partially wrong for disc golf, or I should say it's completely wrong at the highest level, but it's a beginner technique, is that if you took every disc in your bag and you laid out the flight path of each of the discs, if thrown flat across your chest on the ground, you would have a finite number of flight paths, right? If you had 7 drivers and 3 mid-ranges, you'd have 10 different shots you could throw doing this. If you took those 10 shots and you laid them over every single hole you play, you'll find that there's holes out there that don't match up with any of those 10 shots. So by pulling the disc across your chest, you're limiting yourself to what the disc can do. Instead, you want to throw the disc at every different angle as well as this to do every different thing. And by doing that, then you're able to create every type of flight path you want. So instead of pulling it across your chest, think about pulling it in a straight line. If you're throwing a downhill skip shot, which there's some downhill holes here, disc is going to be released here, so it's going to go in a straight line, and it might go across your waist. Turnover shot up high might go across your face. So forget about pulling across your chest, just pull it in a straight line, and that's correct. After you release, in the majority of throws you throw, you want the disc to come out flat. You don't want the nose up or nose down. The 2 ways you do that, first is by pulling it straight. The disc is going to want to be flat. And the second thing is your follow through should continue right along the same plane of the actual throw. So if you're throwing here and you release, your arm should just continue in that exact same motion. As long as it just continues in the same motion, the disc is going to fly flat. If you're throwing a hyzer shot over the trees and you're releasing, your arm should just continue in that motion. By the way, I'm purposely going through stuff quickly, but I'll stop in a second. The last thing on the technique is what to do with the wrist. I never know where this fits in, but I actually just covered what happens with your shoulder, your waist, and your elbow, because when you reach back and pull straight, that's all these things happen. But I didn't talk about the wrist yet. The way to think of the wrist is to think about your wrist like it's a spring and not like a hinge. Your wrist is going to be used like every other joint. It's going to be used to help the disc go forward. But if you took your wrist and you bent it back and you did this, to me that's using your wrist like a hinge. Instead, I like to think of taking my wrist, locking it in a straight line, tying a string around my fingers, and if I pulled hard enough, even though I'm trying to keep my wrist straight, the wrist will bend, but I'm trying to keep it straight, and if I let go of the string, it'll snap back into place. The wrist is doing this motion, but it's not from here to here. It's being pulled off of here like a spring and snapping back into place. Kind of make sense? Okay, well, same thing happens on the throw. Wrist isn't bent on the throw. Wrist is going to be straight. As you accelerate, even though you're keeping it straight, the wrist will bend, but then at the release, when your arm changes direction, it'll snap right back into place again. So think about keeping your wrist straight, and that'll be using it like a spring. Any questions? More people keep showing. This is so awesome. Any questions about the backhand?
I got one.
Yes.
When I drive, I've noticed, looking back at footage, when I come through like this, I put my hand on my leg right there. Is that killing distance?
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
You want, basically, what you want on the other hand is you just want it to be in towards the body. You think about like a figure skater with their hands are out, they rotate slow, they pull their hands in, they start to spin faster. With the same thing, if your hand's out here or out here, you can't rotate as fast. So as long as your hand's in next to your body, you're going to be fine. Generally, you want to just keep it out of the way, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's down, you just don't want it up here. If anybody throws with the arm up here, you're actually fighting yourself. You're going one direction, your hand's going the other. So as long as it's down, you're fine. Okay. Any other questions I could demonstrate? So is there anything, like any water by those trees or anything? No. So I'll just throw through the tunnel and then I can find them probably pretty easily.
Yeah, it's
okay. All right, so if I was doing a 5-step run-up, walking straight down the path, it's 1, 2, slingshot, 1, 2, 3. That barely made the fairway. That wasn't pretty good. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I was going towards the hole, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, the hole's up on the right.
Oh, okay.
It's still.
I got excited. I like demonstrating open fields because wherever it lands, that's exactly where I was trying to throw it. So two important points about the backhand. The first is one of the most common things people say is they say it looks like if I throw far, it looks effortless. Or people who throw far looks effortless. It's not effortless. Like that shot right there, I put everything into that shot. It doesn't look like it so much because you only want to be really exerting energy for a very short period of time, and that's at the point where the disc begins to accelerate. So on your run-up, everything should be completely relaxed all the way through to there. From here to here, everything happens. But because it's only from here to here, it doesn't look like you're trying that hard because it's such a short period of time that you're exerting the energy. This is a really silly example, but if you could picture a ball golfer, like running up the ball and then going, right? It would be ridiculous. Well, that's the same thing as running up on the tee pad and going, and doing that. Same thing. The throw happens from here to here. So everything should be relaxed there. Now, if you run up instead of walking up, that's okay, but still, it's going to be relaxed. But from here to here, that's where all the effort happens. Second thing that's important is that there's two ways to learn how to aim. The first is that everything's linear, right? Everything has to be on that line. That's the only way to aim. The second thing is in order to learn how to keep throwing that line is you want to be consistent. You want to try to repeat the same thing exactly or close as possible every single time. That's how you'll get your timing, right? If you think about if I release early, like I did on that first throw, I released early, it went left. If you release late, it goes right. You want to try to time the release the same way every time. And the only way to do that is to simplify everything as much as possible. Anything that's not part of the throw, you want to eliminate from the throw completely. Because anything that's not necessary is one more thing that you have to time right. It's one more thing to mess up. An example would, in disc golf, would be the double clutch, which you guys have seen a backswing that looks like this, right? All those little extra motions in there are wrong, every one of them. Anything you do that's not part of the throw is something that you have to duplicate the same every time for the timing to be right. If you normally double clutch 14 inches, but this time you went 15 inches, you're gonna get back a little slower, you're gonna release a little bit later, you're gonna miss left. Like every little thing you have to do, you wanna completely eliminate that. Now I'll point out that there are some really, really good golfers on tour you can watch on YouTube who double clutch. But they're good in spite of the fact that they do that, not because they do that. They would be better without it. You want to eliminate that. And I just think about other sports. If you've never seen darts, it doesn't matter. You know intuitively that this would be wrong. Professional pool players aren't going to go like that. Tiger Woods won't go like that. I mean, all those are wrong. It's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, right? Well, same thing with throwing. It's not easy, but it's simple. Your feet do 3 things. 1, 2, 3. The disc does 3 things. 1, 2, 3, and that's it. Like I say, I could talk. If you asked me to talk for another hour about throwing a backhand, I'd have nothing for you because everything else is not part of throwing. It's not easy, but it's simple. Oh, by the way, I also believe this includes things that happen even before the throw that don't seem like they're part of the throw. For example, if your run-up starts like this, right? That doesn't seem like it's part of the throw, but actually, that little shuffle step is something you have to duplicate exactly the same every time, or else it's going to throw your timing off. So instead, think about stepping up to the shot and doing nothing that's not necessary. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
That one's closer.
Is that closer? I'll pretend that I was aiming for that. I wasn't. Any questions about the backhand? No, nothing? All right, so now that I have everybody, I've got to tell you, this clinic, because it was free, comes with ads. The ad-free version costs money, but you guys got the free version. So I'm going to talk to you for just 3 minutes about something unrelated to disc golf, and then I promise to get right back to disc golf. I'm going to talk to you guys about autism. And more specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the isolation that people with autism feel and their families, and what we can do about it. So the thing about autism that makes it so tricky is autism affects the brain. It's a disability that, because it affects the brain, will also affect personality. And the personality of someone with autism is something that can cause that isolation, because someone with autism behaves in ways that can push people away. For example, people with autism don't typically, it's a wide spectrum, so there's no black and white, but as a general rule, they don't pick up on social cues. That's one of the characteristics of someone with autism. So if I, for instance, say something to you that offends you, I can tell immediately by the look on your face that I've offended you. I'm gonna apologize. I'm not gonna repeat that behavior when I talk to you. Someone with autism literally does not have the cognitive ability to interpret those social cues, and they wind up being offensive without meaning to. They're not disrespectful or rude, that's just how they can come across. They can also maybe get up in your face and talk to you from this far away. Same thing. If I do that to you, you tense up, I back off. Someone with autism cannot pick up on that. So that behavior can really push people away, and the reason why it's difficult is because one of the other challenges of autism, because it affects the brain, is that you can't tell at a glance that someone has autism. If they have a wheelchair or a cane or a hearing aid, we know there's a disability there. But without that, we tend to, and I'm guilty of this too, you almost project onto them that they should be able to not behave that way, and they're incapable of it. That's the disability. But that pushes people away, and that creates isolation. The second thing is the families feel isolation because a child with autism, especially for the parents, will behave in ways like, for instance, acting out and having, say, a meltdown in Walmart. The first instinct, and again, I'm totally guilty of this. Kristen has a 20-year-old son with autism. She's guilty of this. But the first thought is, wow, that child needs to be disciplined. Boy, that parent spoils their child, right? You have these thoughts. Well, parents get comments, dirty looks. That creates isolation for them as well. So what I'd like to say is that you can all help remove the isolation caused by autism simply by going over and talking to someone with autism or talking to their families. And all you got to do is remember 3 things to do it. The first is, because we know that they don't pick up on social cues, don't be offended at anything they say. My favorite story about Kristen's son is he walked up to a black woman and asked her if she tasted like chocolate, which is awesome. And she thought the lady reacted was great. She thought it was funny, but you have to just understand it's not because it wasn't a racist joke. It was just he has autism, and that's what he thought. He said it. So don't be offended. Second thing is, because they don't pick up on social cues, when you speak to them, just speak very literal. Don't expect them to pick up on hand gestures. Probably not going to get jokes. So just speak literal to them, and if you do, they can oftentimes understand you perfectly well. Just you got to be very direct. And the third thing is people with autism often fixate on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. If you see a kid with autism and he's wearing a Harley Davidson jacket and a Harley Davidson hat and a Harley Davidson belt buckle, and you're on a disc golf course and you walk up to him with a golf bag on your shoulder, don't expect them to talk to you about disc golf. They might, probably not, but they'll talk your ear off about Harley Davidson. So if you talk to them about their area of interest, you can have this incredibly interesting conversation with them. So with that information, I challenge every person here, when you see someone, if you know they have autism or their families, please just go talk to them, just go say hi, and that will remove some of the isolation they felt yesterday when you weren't around to do that. So, all right, that's all. So that's the ad. So back to disc golf. Sidearm. Do you guys all throw sidearm? Like a lot of you?
Very well.
Okay. The most important thing I would talk about today as far as disc golf goes isn't about how to throw, is that I'm going to try to tell everybody that you have to have a sidearm. Like I used to joke and say, well, you don't have to do anything. I've changed that. You have to have a sidearm. The reason is because, as most of us know, when you throw a disc, if you're right-handed and you want it to go to the left, pretty routine shot, right? Overstable disc turn left, and the disc runs out of spin, it falls back left. I mean, that's a natural shot. Right turn shot's really hard. Turn it over too much, it rolls. Not enough, it fades out. You got to be so precise with the right turn shot, the turnover shot. Any headwind, forget it. It's almost impossible. By throwing sidearm, you reverse the spin of the disc, and if you can reverse the spin of the disc, all of a sudden, all those right turn holes become just as routine as the left turn holes for the backhand. And if you can throw the easier shot in every hole, you have an advantage over people that don't. By the way, if you're a younger player and you have any thoughts of competing at the highest level, these days and in the future, everybody's got every shot nowadays. You're not going to be able to compete without having every shot at the highest level. You could do that in the 90s because the sport was young, not anymore. It'd be like trying to be a PGA pro and not having a good wedge game. Impossible. You got to have every shot. So you have to have every shot to compete at the highest level. So with that in mind, the first thing is the grip. You want to do, again, it's not the universally correct grip. What's important is that you have 2 fingers supporting the rim of the grip with whatever grip you use. This could be index finger on the rim, middle finger on top of it. It could be middle finger on the rim, index finger on top of it. It could be middle finger with the index finger bent. All 3 of those grips are fine. What's important is you have 2 fingers supporting the rim of the disc. The reason it's important is 1 finger just doesn't offer as much support or resistance as 2 fingers will. 2 fingers is simply stronger than 1. And when you go to accelerate the disc forward, 1 finger isn't going to be, it's not as strong as 2. 2 fingers is stronger, you can apply more force to the disc. I will point out that this is a correct grip because this finger, index finger, isn't touching the rim, but it's supporting the finger, which is supporting the rim of the disc. Now I will point out this right here, that's a 1 finger grip. This finger here is not doing anything to propel the disc forward. Second thing, this grip right here is also a 1 finger grip. This finger is just resting on the edge of the disc. It's not actually making the disc go forward. You want 2 fingers under the rim of the disc. On top, same thing as the backhand. You want to take the thumb, slide it up so you can feel the lip of the disc. Don't require just friction on the disc. The run up on the sidearm, I always demonstrate, which is going to seem real silly, but I have my reasons. The run up on the sidearm is this. The reason I demonstrate that is this is the second big misconception of throwing techniques, and that is the idea that you want to be 90 degrees when you're throwing. You know, the target's out this way, so you line up like this. That's wrong. You don't want to start sideways. The way I think of it is, I think about a shortstop in baseball. If they want to get the ball to first base in a hurry, you would never see him pick up the ball and then throw across their body like this. The throw's forward, and so you definitely want to be forward. But then I think about a baseball pitcher. Only start sideways dictates. Empty bases, free rein to start any way they want to. They're going to start forward. They're going to rotate and come back to forward, but the throw starts forward. Well, same thing with the sidearm. Don't start sideways. You want to be facing forward. Now, at some point, you're going to rotate our hips, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, the run-up, again, has 3 steps. The disc is also going to follow 3 separate motions, just like the backhand, 1, 2, 3. Step 1, disc out in front of you, and again, start it where you're going to be releasing it, and set the angle of release. So much easier just to get that disc at the angle you want when you start, and then you can just forget about it. You'll just stay at that angle the whole time. Step 2 is stepping forward and drawing the disc back. Now the slingshot technique, it's hard to quantify why, except that I know you don't want to pull back in a straight line. The body just doesn't work that way. So you don't have to pull back in a straight line. There's 2 ways to draw the disc back. The first is, it's on the second step, is swing the disc down, that's what I like to do, but I can't find any flaw and come over the top. If you want to come over the top, that's just as good. Either way, you're going to rotate back and have to get back here and stop. So whichever way is more comfortable with you, you can go for it. Now on the backswing is where the hips begin to be used. Remember, just like the analogy with the wrist, think about using your hips like a spring and not like a hinge again. If you started sideways, to me, that's using your hips like a hinge. Instead, they're forward, but then on the backswing, even though I'm keeping them forward, the backswing will then pull them back. You found them all? Perfect, thank you. The backswing will then rotate your hips, but because I'm trying to keep them forward, the backswing pulls my hips out of alignment like a spring, so I can then snap back forward again. So think about keeping it forward, and the backswing pulls it out. Now, at this point in the throw, here forward, there's only one thing you're going to be doing, and that's trying to put spin on the disc. The reason why the sidearm is a more challenging throw to learn is that the faster a disc flies, the more spin it needs relative to how fast it's going. If I throw from me to you, I don't need a lot of spin, but the faster it goes, the more spin it needs. With the backhand, spin happens automatically. That's why I didn't mention spin with the backhand. Everyone here spins the disc enough on the backhand, no problem. I mean, that's why that's frisbee, right? Because the spin happens. With the sidearm, the spin doesn't automatically happen. Now, the way you can tell if the disc is spinning enough is just by watching it fly. If you throw the disc and it flies through the air like this, it doesn't have enough spin. Gyroscopically, the faster the disc is spinning, the faster it's spinning, the faster it'll stop wobbling and it'll fly smooth. So it might come out of your hand with a little bit of wobble, but if it spins enough, it'll quickly stop wobbling and fly smooth. This is why most players, when we first started to throw the sidearm, we throw it and it does this. That's because we don't know how to spin the disc yet. So everything from here is about how to spin the disc. And there's 3 things that you do to spin the disc. The first is, on the backswing, and this is the opposite of everything else, but with the sidearm, you want to use the wrist like a hinge and not like a spring. So everything else is a spring, except for this. This is the exception. Wrist like a hinge, not like a spring. That's because this motion right here is one of the ways you're going to get the disc to spin. The second thing you want to do is, when you come forward, is you want to lead with your elbow. Now this is the biggest misconception in throwing techniques by far. Have you guys heard that you want to keep the elbow close to the body on the sidearm? Okay. It's absolutely 100%, I promise you, that's completely wrong. Just forget you ever heard that. It's completely wrong. This is the dumbest analogy I have, but I always give it. If dinosaurs played disc golf, T-Rex would have the worst sidearm of all the dinosaurs, because it would throw like that, right? Well, if you keep your elbow close to the body in the sidearm, that's what it looks like. I call it Rexing. If you watch someone else do it, clearly that would be wrong. It would be obvious that watching that. But if we do it because it's hard to see yourself. So forget about keeping it close to your body in the sidearm, it's wrong. On the backswing, the elbow is going to be way back here, nowhere near your body. When you come forward, you're going to lead with your elbow. If you're throwing a hyzer, it might pass close to your body. It might pass out way, on a turnover shot, way aside from your body. Doesn't matter as long as the elbow gets there first. And then on the throw, elbow's way out here in front of your body again. So just forget you ever heard keep it close to your body. Instead, lead with your elbow. If the elbow comes first, that's right. And the final thing is that you want to reduce the follow through on the sidearm. Now this is counterintuitive, because if you were trying to throw like a ball, that's the most amazing mini skip I've ever seen in my life. He just skipped a mini like 90 feet perfect anyways. That's hard to do. So if you were trying to throw a ball as fast as possible, you'd want to follow through, right? But we're not worried about speed, we're worried about spin relative to speed. If instead of throwing with follow through, you stop the arm, two things are going to happen without follow through. The first is it's not going to fly as fast, right? So ultimately it's not going to fly as far because you have less speed. But by stopping your hand, you're also going to generate more spin. So the spin relative to speed is going to be better, which is what you're trying to do. Once a disc is spinning enough, which you can tell by watching it fly, eventually you can start adding follow through, and eventually you learn to spin enough with your wrist, you can follow through at full speed. But the spin comes first. So think of it like snapping a towel. If you take a towel and do this, nothing happens, right? But if you take a towel and do that, the towel speeds up and snaps at the end. So think about reducing that follow through. So the 4 things to do in the sidearm: face forward, cock your wrist back like a hinge, lead with the elbow, and then release the follow through. And that's how the disc is going to spin. Any questions? Or I can demonstrate? That's near. Is that near the basket?
Yeah, pretty close.
Okay. All right. I think it'd be really cool to throw in. So it's 1, 2. So one thing I like to demonstrate, just because I think it's kind of fun, just to illustrate how important spin is. These are identical. These are potters. They're basically wizards. I'm going to throw each of these as close as I can to the exact same speed with the exact same angle, the exact same height. First one I'm not going to spin enough. Second one I will. And this is how much of a difference it is. So this is without enough spin. Just thrown flat. And the exact same throw thrown flat. I wasn't actually aiming for the basket, but that's how much difference that the spin makes. So once you learn to put the spin in the disc isn't turning over so much, then you can be consistent. Final thing to say about the sidearm is the most common question I get is what's your sidearm disc? And that's the exact same question as what's your backhand disc? Like you don't have a backhand disc, right? You have a whole bag full because this left turn shot is not like the next left turn shot, right? Well, so same thing. On a mirror image of the hole, one disc isn't going to be right for every single hole as well. You want to learn how to throw every disc in your bag, backhand, and sidearm as well. And the reason I demonstrate that is because when you start throwing a sidearm, the natural tendency is to pick something really, really overstable, because even though the disc does this and turns over, the overstable disc still goes to the right. It doesn't flail off to the left somewhere. But once you learn to spin the disc and it doesn't do that and it actually flies away, leaves your hand, then you want to have every disc to throw every different type of shot with. So, any questions about the sidearm?
I have a problem turning my wrists over. I've played tennis my entire life. What's a good way, it's a good exercise to prevent that?
To turn your wrist over?
Yeah, when I'm coming through, I'm used to hitting the forehand, the top spin. So I'm turning my wrists over on
Reduce the follow through. Instead of coming through over like this, think about stopping the follow through. And again, you gotta lose distance on it. But initially, you can actually throw with no follow through at all, and then start to add more. But if you're coming over the top of it like this, that's because you're following through. Like forget the follow through.
Okay.
It seems really, like I said, it's kind of counterintuitive, but even without a follow through, you can still get quite a bit of distance still. But when you follow through, when you follow through, you'll actually get more. But yeah, that's it. It's all wrist. It's snapping and towel. The sidearm's that, not that. Any questions? So a couple things. I have discs for sale. That's my plug. I don't talk about autism and discs for sale during my plug. But I do have discs for sale. We're playing doubles. If you guys want to play, we'll play 18 holes. We probably want to be kind of efficient to get started on time. I didn't want anybody to like miss out, so I kind of started late. It's $12 a person. It's for prizes, but it's for MVP discs and fly high discs. MVP is the coolest company. I'm such a huge fan, and so prizes are cool. But and then if anybody's interested in talking about putting, we'll do it afterwards. Even if it gets dark, we can do it. afterwards. But that's the clinic. So, thank you guys. I did all of that on one breath. I'm all right with that. Such a great course.
Oh,
Right off the rim.
wow.
If I loved you, I would have made that. I'm so sorry. For a second, like I know what I'm doing. Oh, I want to get that one.
Wow.
Putters very well.
I've got an Atom here if you want to throw it.
I've never thrown one.
You want to try it?
Believe it or not. Sure. How do they fly?
A little understable.
Do they go through?
Uh-oh.
They fly right into trees. Those are supposed to be horrible discs. Oh, the pros?
Pros aren't even in.
I could give two shits about the pros. Sorry. Pros don't buy anything. Anybody ever run a tournament? You ever had a pro actually buy a disc off you? No? Nobody? Crickets? Okay. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.